Glacier National Park 2024. First stop, headed up to Kintla Lake. Takes a better part of an hour once you actually make it to Pole Bridge entrance. There's kokanee salmon in that lake. Have not caught one of those in my 4 trips to the park, so hoping to get into those. The road going up to Kintla is pretty rough, and 20 mile per hour speed limit. You wouldn't want to go any faster than that. So yeah, see if we can get some salmon.
Under the towering mountains that border Canada, Lake Kintla is 5.5 miles long, with a campground at the foot and a boat landing. However, no motors are allowed. It is manpower only. You can catch some nice fish around the foot, but I found the fishing to be most consistent once you got closer to the head, especially around the bend where the lake narrows. With an afternoon arrival, needing to set up camp, have dinner, and get the kayak ready, I didn't get on the lake until after 3 p.m. However, in July, the sun doesn't set until after 9:30, and with an extra long twilight period, it's light out past 10 o'clock, almost until 11. So I figured I would have to just split the time I had until dark in half, and turn around and head back towards camp and just see how far I could get. If I made it the whole way, it would be about an 11-mile paddle, which is pretty aggressive, but if you've seen my other videos and if you know me, you wouldn't put it past me.
There we go. Another nice laker. They are non-native and super aggressive. There's bull trout supposedly in here. So I think I should probably keep this guy in and eat him.
Lake Kintla is on the Flathead River drainage, where lake trout are non-native, and since they got in there, have wreaked havoc and been a menace to the native fish such as bull trout, and one of the main reasons that bull trout are listed as threatened on the endangered species list. Although the presence of lake trout is a huge ecological nightmare for this lake, ironically, they sure are fun to catch. Forgot my tape measure for this little spin around the lake, but I cut a piece of paracord the same length as this fish, which ended up being the biggest of the day, and I measured later at 27 inches.
Yeah, big old lake trout. Probably 26, 27.
I didn't get to see what that was. Good fighter. Got up to the surface and just shook his head like they do and shook the hook loose. Just barely hooked by the lip. Man, sun behind me. Couldn't really see what it was, but I thought it was something a little different than a lake trout. Would have liked to see what that is. Dang. Maybe a kokanee or a bull trout. Keep trying. We've got some size. Come on now. Let's get this one in the boat.
Lake trout will actually come up from really deep in the lake, and although some species of fish will get a really bad case of the bends and kill the fish with their eyeballs popping out of their head, lake trout actually have the ability to burp, and that's what you're hearing here. Sometimes you know you got a lake trout on the other end of the line when you see the bubbles rising and you can actually hear it burping under the water. So don't worry, I'm not squeezing the life out of this fish. He is just relieving the pressure. I made it as far as the backcountry campsite at Lake Kintla Head when I decided I should probably turn around and start the 5-mile paddle back to my campsite at Lake Kintla Foot. Now I had caught 7 lake trout, and instead of dragging about 30 pounds of meat through the water when I was already going to be back pretty late, I decided I would humanely dispatch the fish and feed the bald eagles. Now that may sound wasteful to some, however, the Maine biologist and fisheries has said the worst thing you could possibly do is put a living lake trout back in the lake in the flathead drainage. They actually will come out with gill nets and catch as many as they can and kill them just to give the native species, cutthroat and bull trout, a fighting chance to survive the invasion. The park ranger that stays at Lake Kintla Foot also fishes and keeps lake trout and will make fish tacos for all the other park rangers on Tuesdays. However, his freezer was completely full from other people giving him lake trout, and I knew I was going to catch more lake trout the next day for myself, so I had no issues with feeding the birds.
Good morning from Kintla Lake. It rained last night and my old hand-me-down REI tent, my backup tent, did not fare that well. A few different spots where the rain came in. I stayed dry, my stuff stayed dry, but I realized it's not going to do that good if it's ever a serious rainstorm. Caught 7 lake trout last night. One was 27 inches, and although I had different ideas of what to do today, maybe go to Bowman Lake, I think I'm going to go back out and try to see if I can find that 30-incher. Talked to the park ranger here. He's caught a 34-inch lake trout as his personal best, and another group I talked to has caught some pretty big ones as well. Unfortunately, that's all that's left in this lake is lake trout, seemingly. They've pretty much taken over. Native fish are bull trout and cutthroat trout, and they are supposedly in Upper Kintla Lake, which is closed to fishing to protect them. And yeah, there used to be kokanee salmon in here, but pretty much lake trout have taken over. So if you do catch lake trout, the worst thing you can do is put them back alive. The park ranger here, he'll take lake trout. He's got his freezer full right now, but he opened up another fridge down by the entrance and is giving them away as fast as he can. So I think I'm going to go back out today and see if I can find that 30-incher and remove a few more invasive lake trout from this from Lake Kintla. We'll see what happens.
I was headed back for another lap trolling the shorelines of Lake Kintla, but not before chatting with a friend I had made from Portland, Oregon, Curtis, who came out here every year with a significant other to catch lake trout and enjoy the beautiful park. Curtis would catch them by tossing a silver spoon and jigging them around 30 to 40 feet deep, which was effective to catch some dandies over the years. I started by casting a silver meps around the shorelines, which did produce a few trout, but what I found worked best for me was trolling a white-bodied redhead diver that ran about 15 feet deep, and I would try to find from 25 to 35 feet deep, which was usually where I could see the bottom off to my left, but not off to the right. It wasn't long before I realized it was going to be a soggy day. I put 8 more lake trout on the stringer this day, which was my second 11.5 mile paddle in as many days, and they were all 25 to 27 inches, which are nice sized lakers. They were a lot of fun to catch. I did not hit my goal of catching a 30-incher though, so I guess I would have to keep trying on other lakes. I was headed to Logging Lake next. I found the best fishing on Kintla Lake to be the half of the lake that was on the side where the head of the lake is. And really, the closer you got to the head, the better the fishing seemed to be, more consistent and bigger fish. I was pretty soggy after dealing with on and off rain showers, and when I was about halfway back to camp, I got absolutely downpoured on. I was wearing rain gear, but that only goes so far when you're sitting in water up to your belt buckle. The rain gear at that point was just helping to keep me warm. I definitely shivered my way back to camp. It was worth it though. I'll leave you with a final review and some advice for Kintla Lake, which was maybe the most consistent lake trout fishing I've ever had, catching 15 in 2 days, and nice size ones with trophy potential. The park ranger who lives there told me he's caught in a 34-incher before. I had to work a little bit, 22 miles of paddling. However, I don't think you have to do that. You can probably catch them around the campground at the foot and have some pretty fun fights with some pretty nice lake trout, but I did find it more consistent the closer you get to the head. And instead of paddling, you could hike. There is a trail that goes from the foot to the head along the North Shore, but I'm not sure what the access would be like. You probably have to do a bit of a bushwhack from the trail down to the shoreline, and not sure if you could reach the depths where you would find the fish. I found the fish anywhere from 15 to 30 feet deep. I fished in late June. I think the best fishing you're going to find is mid to late June is when they're going to be spawning, when the water temperature is the most ideal for the fish to be up higher and feeding. You can probably catch them year round, but the later you get into the year, the deeper they're going to be, the harder they are to get to, and the less aggressive they're going to be for feeding. You can get a fishing regulations pamphlet from any of the visitor stations, and I would highly recommend carrying that because it tells you what is and is not native in certain lakes and watersheds. For example, the lake trout being non-native in Kintla Lake, ironically are native in a different part of the park in the eastern side, the Belly River and Waterton drainage, where you have to catch and release them because they're native species. In Kintla Lake, they're extremely invasive non-native species, and you should kill everyone you catch. The biologist and fisheries would appreciate that. They work pretty aggressively to try to restore the native fish like the bull trout and cutthroat, bull trout being threatened on the endangered species list. You might catch those, however, I doubt it. They're in Upper Kintla Lake, and some might come down to Kintla to Lower Kintla. However, they're probably going to get gobbled up by the lake trout pretty quickly. The fishing regs do say that there's kokanee salmon in Kintla Lake. However, the park ranger said he hasn't caught any or heard of anyone catching any in the last 20 years, so that's not likely. And if you're not familiar with identifying different types of fish, there is a pamphlet you can also get from the visitor centers that show you how to identify all the fish in Glacier National Park. I carry one with me as well as the fishing regs in the kayak. Also critical, get your vessel inspected, kayak, canoe, or even a paddleboard. Make sure there's no aquatic invasive species on there. So bring it clean, but still get it inspected. Even a tiny grain of sand could have eggs for something like zebra mussels, which could take over and destroy an entire watershed fishery. There's major watersheds coming out of Glacier. They go to the Hudson Bay, to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Pacific Ocean. So absolutely critical that invasive species are not brought in there. Kintla is also very beautiful, not that most of Glacier National Park isn't. The difference being the crowds are limited and not as many people want to take the trek up to Kintla, which is the furthest drive you can possibly make in Glacier National Park. Also a very rough road, so it's much more quiet and peaceful in Kintla Lake. So I had a great time. I'm not too worried about spot burn with Kintla Lake. You'll notice I don't always say the names of the lakes I'm fishing in all of my videos because spot burn is a real thing. However, in Kintla Lake being all non-native invasive lake trout, I think it would be beneficial if lots of people went and fished Kintla Lake. Fisheries use angling as a tool to manage the ecology. If thousands of people saw this video and went and fished Kintla Lake, all the lake trout they caught, there's no limits. They can clip the gills, feed them to the eagles, feed them to themselves, do whatever they want with them, and just shouldn't put them back just for the sake of the natives. And if those same people catch native fish, it's required they catch and release them and carefully handle and immediately release any bull trout being threatened on the endangered species list. So you can learn the best practices. It reduces the mortality on the native fish, even if you catch and release them. There's a chance there is a little bit of mortality. So you can learn, make sure your hands are wet if you're going to touch them so you don't remove the protective slime that keeps them from getting bacterial infection. You can pinch in your barbs or remove a treble hook. It's not required. I do get a lot of people commenting in my videos that I'm not allowed to be using treble hooks. However, trust me, I've read the fishing regs every time I've gone to Glacier for all 4 years, and all of them say that you can use barbed treble hooks, except for in the North Fork of the Flathead River is the only place you can't. But up to you what you want to do there. If you're worried about bull trout and cutthroat trout, then pinch in your barbs and remove your treble hooks. However, if you want to catch lake trout, then you might want to have barbed treble hooks so that you can more effectively, efficiently catch and remove as many lake trout as you can. So I go to a lot of lakes on this trip. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of what I catch in those other lakes. Otherwise, as always, Thanks for watching.